God. G-O-D. A simple three-letter word that encompasses all of reality. God encompasses all reality. If we're going to go back to basics, you can't get more basic than God, can you? Talking about our faith. In the beginning, as Jackson read so beautifully, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God is the creator. And God is from before the beginning. You ever think about that? As creator, God is from before the beginning. And this is the most basic, fundamental belief. But what does this mean to affirm that God is the creator? I want to focus on this key belief today because we human beings happen to be creatures. We have been created. We are not the creators. We are the creatures. And we are created by God. And God is the very context of our existence. The Apostle Paul expressed it beautifully when he was in Athens on Mars Hill. He said, in him we live and move and have our being. So it's vital that you and I relate to God as creator and not relate to God as though God were a creature, a created being. So many people, even Christians, when they talk about God, when they think about God, they talk as if God were a part of creation and not the creator at all. We actually tend to treat God as a creature, as a part within creation, rather than the creator of all creation. Just a simple illustration of this is the language we use. How many of you refer to God as the man upstairs, right? Oh, God, the man upstairs. This is a very, very common way. We're all very familiar with it. But have you ever thought about what that implies? First of all, by saying God is upstairs somewhere, it's like, okay, God exists in some other place, some part of our universe, but is not necessarily here, right? So when we locate God somewhere else, then one thing we're doing is we're sort of limiting God, because God is upstairs, and we can even try to hide from God. You ever done that? We can try to hide from God, because God's upstairs, and we can build some kind of a barrier and hide from God. It gives us a sense, another implication of this, the God man upstairs, is that it gives us a sense that we're separate from God somehow, that we're autonomous and we can exist independently of this creator, of this God, the man upstairs. And then what about that, referring to God as the man? There's a technical term for that. I'll see if it comes to your mind. I'm not going to tell you what that technical term is. But when we treat God and give God human characteristics in behavior, we attribute human characteristic behavior to God, like God, the man. We talk about God as if God were a human being. We use human language to talk about God. That shouldn't surprise us. I mean, we do this with our pets, don't we? Like our cats and dogs. We treat them as if we attribute human characteristics to them. As I was thinking about this week, I went on YouTube and looked up an old Lassie episode. Now, some of you are too young to remember Lassie. It's the most famous dog in America back in another era. And little Timmy, right? And la da 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 da. The theme song still goes in my mind. And I watched just a little vignette, and here's just Timmy and Lassie. And Timmy's talking to Lassie just like another friend or his mom or dad in the room. And hey, Lassie, da 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 da. And Lassie goes and picks something up and barks, whoo, whoo. And then, oh yeah. It's like Timmy understood exactly what Lassie had said, right? And you get the impression that if Timmy had asked him, well, Lassie, how do I get to the drugstore? Lassie could bark and say, oh, it's 2 doors down and turn left, you know? We attribute things like that. And so this language of talking about God as the man, as if God's a human being, we really can't help that. We can't help it. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying if we need to be aware that what we're doing, that God is not a human being. God's the creator. God's much greater than that. But because of our own limitations as people, as human beings, we don't have the language to capture the grandeur and greatness of the Creator. And if God wants to communicate with us at all, God has to communicate with us in categories and language and images and experience that we understand. So it makes sense, all the sense in the world, that God would teach us that we would use language like the man upstairs and refer to God as a human being. But it's good to be reminded once in a while that God is not a human being and that language does not contain God at all. It only sort of illustrates and points to the real being of God. When I talk to people, even in my office in a pastoral counseling situation, one of the things I listen for and I ask myself is, what is the image of God that's implied by what they're saying about their faith or the struggle that they're having about their faith? They're not going to come right out and say, well, God is this or God is that. But what is implied by that? And I've come to realize that for so many Christians, and certainly for people, when I watch people in movies or on television or something, and they start talking about God or give their complaints about God or reasons why they don't want to believe in God, the God they're talking about is not the Creator. The God they're talking about is a creature, a divine being, with divine powers, but within creation, not the Creator. People are thinking of and relating to a God who's creature rather than creator. I think of the Force in Star Wars, right? Now, that's not a personalized sense, but there's just the dark side and the light side, and you have the agents of the dark side with Darth Vader and the Emperor, and the light side with the Jedi Knights and this kind of a thing. And yet, that force is something within reality, within the universe. This doesn't transcend the universe. Or you got the picture here from Marvel Comics. I mean, some of you are young enough. I've got some real Marvel fans over here. Thor, there's been a movie out recently. I did not go see this one, but Thor, of course, Thor is a god from the Norse mythology, and he has that powerful hammer, right? And Thor is a divine being, is a god. And he's got that incredible powers, the supernatural powers. Or the picture you're seeing is Doctor Strange. Benedict Cumberbatch does a great job. It's Doctor Strange of the multiverse. And some of you have no clue what that is, and that's just okay. But Doctor Strange is able to take energy from multiple universes and channel them for his own purposes and uses. And even the devil is not God. The devil is creature. For Dr. Strange, the devil are creatures. They are not creator because they depend on a source of power other than themselves. Is not the source of the power. He's a channel of the power. Dr. Strange is not the source of the power. He's a channel of the power. The devil is not the source of the power. He's not an equal creator, evil God versus a good God. No, there is one creator God, and the devil is a creature God. Because there is a power behind them as the source. They are not the source. So they use magic so that they can access this power and control it somehow for their own purposes. But God, we've got to be clear about this. God is not creature. God is the creator. God is greater than creation. God encompasses all of creation. So let's take a deep dive into what this means. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to sound very philosophical, but you will be able to understand it. You will. But you can't talk about God as creator without sounding a bit philosophical, because you're getting really down to the bedrock of existence itself, okay? As creator, God is the origin of all reality. As creator, God is the origin, the source of all reality. Without God, nothing exists. Without God, nothing exists. And God encompasses all that exists because God is greater than reality. God is the origin of reality. Take that home and let it sink in and chew on it a little bit. Just by saying that God is the origin of reality, can you see how different that is from a Thor or a Doctor Strange or a devil? Huge, huge difference between a powerful being that's a part of creation versus the one who's the very origin and source of all that exists. God is the source. The problem is, in our world, we take God out of the picture completely when it comes to reality and existence. You're very familiar with this, but we call it the naturalist approach. That is, that everything, we start with matter and energy and time. That's the starting point. And then we try to describe what it is, how does it function, and all this kind of stuff. And we started to go back to origins. They point back to the Big Bang as a singularity where all the matter of our universe was in like a pinprick of something, and all of a sudden it just went 13 billion years or whatever ago, goes like this. And in the naturalist approach to reality, how to describe reality at all, it starts with matter and energy and time. And Albert Einstein discovered this. He realized this. So energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And he understood that matter and energy are interchangeable, that energy becomes matter, and matter is a solid form of energy, and they're interchangeable. But that doesn't explain the universe. That's explaining how things work and the way, what we can observe about things. But it relies on sort of a chain of cause and effect, right? When it comes to people, Charles Darwin, of course, coined the phrase natural selection and survival of the fittest. So that, okay, as things happen, as matter and all this interacts, we see adaptations and developments of things, and they just sort of happen. It's an attempt to explain naturally how things develop and evolve and stuff like that. But if you want to get back to where did it all come from, how did it all begin, you're stuck. Because you have to go back to sort of first causes. Okay, you try to trace from, this is here, and we try to, this came from this, and that came from that, and that's the result of this, and everything somehow is a result of something else. Even if you get to the subatomic particle level, you can't even explain why things have formed or functioned, either at the subatomic level or at the macro level between galaxies. Why is there a force of gravity and all these other kinds of things? You can't, just using first causes and trying to get back, it doesn't work. Because naturalism cannot explain why anything exists at all. It really cannot explain origins. And there's something else. But there's something else that naturalism can explain. It offers no basis for meaning. Do you realize that if there is not a creator God, that there is no foundation, no basis for meaning of anything? Now, philosophers like Bertrand Russell and Jean-Paul Sartre and others have realized this, and they despaired, but they recognize that if you leave the creator God out of the picture, then meaning is totally arbitrary. It's just what any individual decides it is. Now, it is important psychologically for us as people to have a sense that we've chosen our sense of meaning and purpose in life, yet the foundation of the meaning, what does your meaning rest upon? To what do we attribute our meaning to? There is no foundation for it apart from God. It's totally arbitrary. But the good news You ready for some good news? The good news, so don't despair yet. God is the source and the origin and the very ground or foundation of all reality, of everything that exists, wherever it is, in whatever form it may be. When we say that God is the creator, we're saying that God is the source of all contingent reality. Now, contingent reality sounds like a technical thing, but it's not difficult. Contingent, when something is contingent, that means one thing depends on something else, that depends on something else, that depends on something else. Let's say we want to have a soccer game. You cannot, there are all kinds of contingencies or things that have to be in place before you can have a soccer game. One is you actually need a soccer ball that's inflated. You need to have a place where you can do it. You need to have some sense of rules of the game, and people actually know those rules and are able to kick the ball around and play soccer. The soccer game depends on all contingencies or circumstances that make it possible to have a soccer game. But when we affirm that God is the creator, we're saying that God is the very source of all contingent reality. And if you want to trace that back, we're going to origins again. If you trace it back, to affirm that God is creator, you're saying that God is the absolute upon which everything else depends. All contingencies. Everything else depends and flows from the absolute, which is the creator God. Everything. All reality. The naturalist explanation cannot arrive at an absolute upon which everything depends. Not even the little pinprick before the big brain serves that purpose. God is not dependent on anything. God is the ground of existence itself, and all reality is grounded in God. God is bigger than reality. God is more than reality. God is so much more than the man upstairs. When we say that God is creator, we're saying that God is the source of all reality, and this has another implication. Because God is the origin and the source of all that exists, God is also the end or purpose of all reality. That is, everything finds its meaning, if there's any meaning to be had, everything finds its meaning within God and in relation to God. I said earlier that in a naturalist explanation, meaning is totally arbitrary, what any individual decides, but there's no basis for me to say, this is my meaning, and you that meaning, and we can't criticize one another. But all meaning and purpose is actually ultimately grounded in God. It's not arbitrary, but it flows out of the intent and purposes of the Creator. That is the very foundation of the meaning of the existence, the reality, and even our down to the level of our personal meaning. And the meaning of our personal existence is there, because ultimately this means meaning is relational. Since God is the foundation and the very basis for all meaning, that means our meaning is in relation to God. We're going to talk more about people, humanity next week, or the next sermon in the series, but God is the very ground of meaning. We don't decide our meaning, we discover it. We don't decide our meaning, we discover it. And God does not exist in relationship to us, for we're the center of the universe and God is out there. How am I going to relate to God? No. We exist in relation to God. God's the big part, and we're a little one out here. And our meaning, our purpose, our very existence is in relationship to God, the Creator. God does not depend upon us at all for existence or meaning, because existence and meaning are rooted in the very being of God. But we depend upon, for our existence and for our meaning, in every way possible, on the Creator God. The book of Job has a beautiful passage. It says, in God's life is the life of every living thing and the breath of every human being. And then again, the Apostle Paul said, in him we live and move and have our being. This means that God is the reference point for every single aspect of your life. From the fact that you exist at all, to the fact that you are who you are and you were raised where you were raised, and you're sitting here this morning or listening online, God is the very reference point for all reality, but he's also the reference point for your meaning, for your purpose. And God is the reference point for moral standards. God is the one who determines what is good and bad, what is right and wrong. Those are ultimately rooted in the character and the will and the heart of God. The God is the reference point for every single aspect of our lives. I know this has been pretty heavy, but I want you to take some time today and maybe this week to think about the way your image of God, but also think about the way you live your faith day to day, how you relate to God, how you interact with God. And think about that. And then what is the image of God implied by the way I think about God and the way I live and the way I make choices in relation to my faith? Am I relating to and believing in and acting in relationship with a God who's a creature, powerful, divine, but a creature, a part of reality? Or am I relating to the God who is the origin of all reality, the ground of all existence, the reference point for everything in my universe? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Even before there was a beginning, there is God. And it's in this Creator God that we live and move and have our being. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Let us pray. O Creator God, the origin of all reality, the reference point for every aspect of life that we can possibly imagine, and need more so, we worship you. That is the most fundamental, natural response. Being in the presence of the Creator God is to worship, to praise, to adore, and then to submit to say yes to cooperate with, to be in fellowship with. Thank you, O God, for being our Creator. Thank you that you are good, that you are loved, that you are faithful. And I pray that you would help each and every one of us replace a notion of a creature God with the Creator God.